Dayton's ESPN Radio. Today's forecast, 100% chance of overreactions, heated debates, and a slight drizzle of hope for Bengals fans. Sorry, guy with Burrow jersey. You're listening to the Justin Kinner Show, 1410 ESPN Radio.
All right, we are off and rolling here on a Thursday. The Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun food, sports, and spirits. Appreciate you guys tuning in and hanging out with us here today. Bit warmer today. Well, that snow is officially melted and gone, thank goodness. But nonetheless, we got a lot to get into. College football. Ohio State welcomes in the Bruins of UCLA coming up on Saturday night on the football field. Right now, we're at that portion of the season where we have the overlap. It's my favorite time when you got the overlap of college basketball and college football all going at the same time. And we're having fun with that. And I tell you, our next guest, I'm sure he's having fun with it too, because he's working double duty sometimes. The one, the only, Mr. Paul Keels, the voice of the Buckeyes, hanging out with us. Paul, welcome in, sir. How are you?
I'm doing good. How you doing, Justin?
Not too bad. Another day in paradise, as I always say. But glad to have you on, as always. And look, right now, Ohio State, I mean, it's kind of crazy. We wait all offseason for the season to finally get here, and then you look at the calendar, and all of a sudden, within a blink of an eye, it's going to be Thanksgiving here in a few weeks, and Ohio State will be wrapping up the regular season here in a few weeks. This season's flying by.
It certainly is. Even with two buys in it, that you kind of felt like that was going to stretch it out a little bit, but it really has flown by when you think that they've only got 3 regular season games left, only 2 of them left at home. So that just kind of tells you that, it's getting down to where things are even more serious than it had been in the first 2 months.
Paul, Ohio State coming off the 34-10 win at Purdue. Not a very exciting game. I guess the only interesting talking point coming out was, of course, the absence of Carnell Tate. Obviously, his absence was felt out there, but obviously Ohio State's offense so loaded they overcame it. But that was a unique. That was one of the only few unique things that came out of that Purdue matchup this past weekend.
Yeah, and it was one of those things that caught everybody by surprise because Carnell went through warm-ups, and, apparently, we're fortunate that Jim Lachey gets to go to practice every week, and he had noticed that some of his workload in practice had been reduced. There was a little something they were concerned about as far as a potential leg problem. Carnell felt a little tightness during warm-ups, so they decided just to be precautionary about it. No idea what his status will be this coming Saturday, but the amazing thing, Justin, is Jeremiah Smith gets double covered. He still makes great catches. You have Brandon Innes out there doing the things he does. Tight end Max Clare playing against his former team, Ryan Day, saying is maybe the best game he's played this year. But then you throw out guys like, Bryson Rogers and Mylan Graham, and they're able to make some catches. It just shows you the abundance of talent that Ohio State has, as well as their 4 running back committee, and those guys catching passes as well. So as much as you'd like to have Tate out there, as well as he's played, they didn't miss a beat.
Yeah, I think, obviously just move on. You turn the page. You got UCLA coming up, a unique matchup. The first time these two teams are going to go head-to-head since UCLA has jumped in to the Big Ten, of course. Just your thoughts on this matchup heading in. Again, Ohio State with UCLA, Rutgers, and then all of a sudden the game coming up here in just a few weeks. But Ohio State can't be looking ahead because they have UCLA coming up on Saturday night.
Now, think about this. This is how crazy it is, Justin. This is the first time that these two schools have played since the first game after 9/11. They played in September of 2001, a game that was pushed back a week and actually 2 weeks with a delay because of the tragedy of 9/11. They played in the Rose Bowl, a game that Ohio State lost, a game they couldn't even score an offensive touchdown. They got a defensive touchdown and some field goals. It's the first time UCLA's played in Columbus since 1999. Where Steve Bellisari made his first start at quarterback, I believe, and Bob Toledo was the head coach at UCLA, and their former coach, Deshaun Foster, scored a touchdown in that game. So that just tells you how infrequent it is. Obviously, it would be a little more frequent now, but it's, a program that's gone through their issues with a coaching change early in the season. Although they pulled off some surprising wins, they're upset at Penn State, so on and so on. But, the impressive thing about what Ohio State's done, whether it was last week against Purdue or other teams that they're viewed as considerable favorites like this one, they've just taken care of their own business. And, Ryan Day's, one of his favorite catchphrases is becoming make it about themselves. And this team has been consistent when it comes to that.
The one overlying storyline too that people are keeping an eye on as the season has gone on and progressed, the Heisman conversation. I know coaches aren't really going to give two rips about that right now. The players are going to pass on the credit to everybody else, but obviously everyone keeping an eye on the ongoing Heisman campaigns for not one, but two players with Ohio State. Of course, we've talked all season, Paul, when you've come on, just about the ongoing development with, their star quarterback now. And then, of course, Jeremiah Smith. When you look at Julian Sain's development and Jeremiah Smith's production, to have two of these Buckeyes in the conversation for the Heisman, also something to keep an eye on as the season goes on.
It is. And, they play two of the positions that get a lot of that kind of attention, but also the team success brings that about. So it's kind of neat to hear that. And I think you're going to see in the next few weeks, even starting with today with Coach Day's Coaches Show. We had Julian Sain on during the final segment. I think there's going to be kind of a little effort to get him a little more media presence. But certainly there are other guys that are part of it. When you think about what Fernando Mendoza did last week for Indiana, Ty Simpson at Alabama, and others. But, the approach, as you said, Justin, for Ohio State, it's team success first, and those other things come after that. But there's no question that both Julian Sain and Jeremiah Smith deserve to be in that discussion.
Yeah, how tough is that for programs? Like, you don't want to dismiss that because it's such a big deal. That winning that award is such a big deal, but you never want to overemphasize an individual award. But it is interesting seeing the school's approach to putting the Heisman campaigns out there, but you don't want to make it too much about that. That has to be a tough balance for schools because you can't dismiss it, but you also don't want to make it all about that as well.
No, because, we all know that sometimes those are things that can backfire a little bit. I mean, I remember the days back in the 80s and the 70s where, schools would send postcards out promoting their candidates. But, it's team first, and that's certainly something that Ryan Day and his players have embraced. They know what it's like to have a disappointing defeat that can kind of potentially derail things. All you have to do is think back to losing that game to Michigan last year. Now, a 12-team playoff gave you a nice parachute. But this is a team that has been on not letting an opportunity to improve go by, regardless of what the spread is, regardless of what the perception is of how favored you are. This team and these coaches, they know that things can turn in a hurry if you're not as prepared as possible, if you're not performing up to your potential. So it is a fine line to walk. But again, if they have the kind of success that they want to have and that we think they possibly can have, those kind of individual talents, in most cases, will take care of themselves.
Another thing that coaches and players and programs like to pretend that they don't care about, obviously they don't want to put anything out to the media for any bulletin board material, but obviously the playoff rankings, we're, two playoff ranking reveals in at this point when it comes to that. And, not really a whole lot of drama. That was the one thing about the 12-team playoff. I thought that we talked about the watering down of the regular season. I still feel like the regular season has had a lot of big time matchups week in and week out. They feel big, but I think the only thing it's watered down, Paul, has just been these playoff rankings reveal. I just don't really care about them as much as I used to, but not a whole lot of drama. The same 5 teams this week as last week, and they've matched the AP as well. Not a whole lot of shakeup up at the top. A lot of these teams kind of holding steady.
And as long as those teams at the top take care of their business, there probably isn't going to be. Just maybe the most discussed point about, especially the one that came out this past Tuesday, is how Notre Dame still ranked considerably ahead of a Miami team that defeated them earlier in the season. So, it doesn't really matter right now. Yes, there's some positioning that's part of it. But, I think if you see those 4 and 5 teams at the top, they take care of business. That's going to take care of things for themselves. But there's still, with 3 weeks to go in the regular season and conference championship games there's still a lot to play out regarding the positioning for the playoff field.
The one thing I was kind of sitting back waiting on, I was curious, and I don't want to use the word punished, but I thought with Indiana struggling, I mean, it took a full 4-quarter effort to beat a team that lost 5 games, and it's Penn State. There's a lot of good players on that roster still. They had national championship expectations because of the talent on that roster. They may not be winning games, but it's still talented. But either way, Indiana struggled and barely pulled away to, beat a 5-loss team. I was kind of sitting back waiting to see if the committee was kind of nudge them for that and maybe propel Texas A&M over them because they got that win over top 25 Missouri on the road. Were you surprised at all that the committee has just kind of basically left all of this alone? They basically not overlooked it, but just didn't really make that as a big a deal as maybe what they would have in seasons past?
No, not overly surprised, because you can look at it a couple of different ways. You can look at it the way you described it. They went on the road and struggled against a Penn State team that's talented but hasn't played as well as we thought. But you can also look at it, okay, they found themselves in a tough spot, and they had the wherewithal to come out and win the game. And in Indiana's case, they still might very possibly possess the single most impressive victory that anybody in college football has this year to date, going to Oregon and winning that game out there. So, they've got a lot of stock build up. Now, obviously, with what Indiana has to finish the regular season out, isn't potentially as threatening as what Ohio State's going to have, as what Texas A&M is going to have, and what Alabama's going to have until a possible matchup against Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. So, yeah, I can see how you'd say, yeah, they struggled against a struggling Penn State team, but they found a way to win, and somewhere you got to give them credit for that too.
Paul Keels, voice of the Buckeyes, with us here. You're going to hear Paul Keels on the call Saturday night as Ohio State welcomes in UCLA, their first matchup since UCLA joining the Big Ten. And as you talked about, Paul, I didn't even realize it's been that long since they have faced one another. So it's been a minute, but it's going to be an interesting head-to-head coming up on Saturday night, 7:30. The kickoff. We'll have pregame coverage beginning at 6 o'clock. Other big matchups around college football. Usually I throw out some big Big Ten matchups, but one that I think is going to have a lot of ramifications on the very rankings that we were just talking about, Paul, the Texas and Georgia top 10 matchup, number 10 Texas at number 5 Georgia. That definitely is going to play a role in maybe the layout to the rankings next week.
No question, and I think it's going to answer a couple of questions. Has Texas improved, and are they playing better football now? And also, have maybe we been sleeping on Georgia a little bit? Gunnar Stockton is put together some very good games here. So, that's going to have a lot to do with just shaping how things will play in the SEC with potential matchups in their championship game. Certainly Texas A&M sitting out there just waiting to see if cannibalism kind of helps their case a little bit, although they're going to have some tough games. They'll play Texas later in the year. So that will be an interesting one. And certainly I think the quarterback matchup certainly gets a lot of attention, but how do those two teams play defensively will be a big part of it.
Paul, I meant to ask you this last week. I was on the Wright State. We were in Cali for their season opener last week. So we didn't have a show last Thursday, but I wanted to ask you this because I had it in my notes and forgot about it. So I just saw it. But the Wisconsin, they came out and said that, hey, we're, with all these coaching firings, I think we were all kind of anticipating when we were going to hear Luke Fickell's name being added to that list. It was actually refreshing in today's landscape of college athletics where, where so many programs are impatient and cut the cord, cut ties very quickly. Wisconsin, it was refreshing. They came out and said, not only are they going to bring back Luke Fickell next season, they are going to invest more into the program. It was kind of refreshing hearing that a program is basically taking accountability, saying, hey, this isn't on the coach. We played a role in this too, and we're going to do our part by investing more into the program. What was your takeaway when you heard that news? Were you shocked at all, just considering the climate to college athletics right now?
I wasn't overly shocked for a number of reasons, Justin. And, what you said about investing in the program. When we were in Madison, there were folks there that cover Wisconsin that talked a lot about they were probably ill-prepared for NIL and being ready to compete at that level with other teams at the top of the Big Ten Conference. The other mitigating factor is in all three of Luke Fickell's season there, their projected starting quarterback has been injured and missed most of, if not all of the season. So I think that's, not to use it as an excuse, but it certainly is a major, major factor, as well as other injuries. But this also kind of shows that the athletic director is on the spot too. Chris McIntosh, he made the hire. So I think it was a little bit of all of those things thrown into one, and then add another component to it. And maybe other schools have to face this question, but at Wisconsin, it's maybe a bigger question than most. If you make a change, who are you going to get? And Luke Fickell's body of work has shown with what he's done at Cincinnati and his work as an assistant at Ohio State shows his qualities. But if you make a change, who are you going to get? You better have a pretty good idea who you're going to get. But then maybe the most ironic thing about that, they do that and they play a game and they end up beating Washington. So it'll be interesting to see how they finish the season, if they're able to get some momentum going, but then even more interesting to see how they do invest in the program to make themselves a little more competitive, especially at the NIL level.
Well, as far as the Big Ten matchups are concerned this weekend, Wisconsin, well, they have the number 2 team in the country, Indiana, and they have them on the road. Wisconsin, Luke Fickell on the road at number 2, Indiana. Indiana coming off, obviously, that very exciting win against Penn State last week. So that'll be an interesting one coming up on Saturday.
It will be. And I think that, certainly Indiana playing it. And if I'm not mistaken, that'll be Indiana's last home game. So that certainly will tell you where the Hoosiers are and how they continue to kind of move forward toward a march to a Big Ten championship game. And can Wisconsin catch lightning in a bottle? It's hard to expect that Wisconsin's going to have enough to be able to win that football game, but what does one win do? Can it spawn another one? That'll be the interesting part to see.
Michigan at Northwestern. Michigan, again, they're quiet. They just keep winning. They haven't lost since the USC matchup about a month ago. They're at Northwestern, at Maryland. That's their two matchups before the big game coming up to close out the regular season. Ohio State, obviously, with UCLA and Rutgers before that showdown. But, so with Michigan at Northwestern, not obviously a sexy matchup by any means, but always going to be keeping our eye on what that team up north is doing, especially with the matchup just weeks away.
And that game is at Wrigley Field, so that'll be interesting. And we saw that in person, what it's like having a team play in that game. But, Michigan has shown their strength in running the football. And I think what that's done is allowed E.J. Underwood to continue to grow up as a quarterback. But, Northwestern is a team that is kind of sneaky. Last Friday, a game they lost at USC, they were really kind of in it until that controversial play in which USC should have been penalized. I'm sure you read about that. With the third-string quarterback came into punt, they had given him the same number as their regular punter 3 weeks ago. So it wasn't a penalty for that. But then the next time when the punter came in wearing the same number, they should have been penalized. According to what at least I've read from the rule, you can't have two different players wearing the same number and playing the same position. If that conversion and that fake punt doesn't happen, maybe Northwestern gets a little momentum and maybe they play a little better. So Northwestern's just kind of been sneaky good. They've not been, what they have been at years in the past under Randy Walker and under Pat Fitzgerald. But David Braun has really inherited a challenging program there and has made them competitive. So it'll be an interesting one to monitor.
And last one here, obviously, and this is, again, when we talk about the additions or with the conference realignment, when you get USC and UCLA and, Oregon and these West Coast programs added to the Big Ten, you get interesting ones like this, a top 25 Big Ten showdown, USC and Iowa going head to head. This one, of course, at USC this weekend, but a top 25 showdown, the only one in the Big Ten this weekend.
And Iowa is, again, we've become familiar with how Iowa plays. They had themselves in a position to beat Oregon with the kind of game that Iowa needs to play to be competitive against an opponent like that. Can they do the same thing against USC? And while the Trojans have played, especially Maeva and Lemon, their receiver, they played very well in the offensive side in their passing game. There might still be some questions about USC defensively. So that'll be interesting. But, Iowa they're still working on their offensive game as far as throwing the football, but Gronowski, their quarterback, has proven to be a running threat. So that will be interesting because I'm not so sure that people are still totally sold on USC, and there's still always that feeling that Kirk Ferentz in Iowa, that they can kind of urinate in your soup and make it taste bad.
I don't know why I wasn't expecting that. Sorry, but yeah, Paul Keels, voice of the Buckeyes, awesome enough to give us some time here today. Paul, are you on the basketball call on Sunday? Or are you doing football and basketball this weekend?
Absolutely. That's going to be a quick turnaround with a 12:30 tip with Notre Dame. They wouldn't let me boondog that one.
I was going to say, hey, what's your thoughts on Ohio State here early? They've done a good job handling, obviously, some mid-major programs, some tune-up games, but obviously they have Notre Dame coming up. But just your overall view of Ohio State during the early goings of year 2 under Jake Diebler.
What's been interesting, Justin, is first off, it was last Friday against Purdue-Fort Wayne. Bruce Thornton goes crazy with the 38-point game. And when we know that Bruce Thornton is kind of the straw that stirs the drink, they played their last game the other day without Devin Royal due to a hip injury. Hopefully that's something that will have him back. But maybe the biggest thing you're seeing is the transfers that Jake Diebler brought in are really providing what they needed. Brandon Knoll, who was at Wright State, a double-double the other night. Christoph Tilley, a 7-footer who's not only showing what his size can do, but he's a big man that can play well around the perimeter. So it looks as though, based on 3 games so far, they filled their needs through the transfer portal. And if Thornton and Mobley can continue to play the way we know they can, and if Devin Royal can get back healthy, this game Sunday against Notre Dame, and I haven't looked yet into what Notre Dame's done so far, but that will give us more of an indication. But impressed by what we've seen so far.
All right, good stuff. Paul Keels, busy weekend ahead. We'll be on the call Saturday night. Ohio State welcomes in UCLA, 7:30 the kickoff. We'll have pregame coverage for you right here, 1410 ESPN Radio and Z93, Dayton's radio home for Ohio State football. That starts at 6 o'clock. And then, of course, on Sunday for Ohio State, Notre Dame, Paul will be on the call for that as well. Paul, thank you for joining us each and every week. We appreciate you on today, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Sounds good. Take care, Justin.
All right, good stuff. It's the Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. We'll get back into some college football discussion coming up here around the corner. I thought this was interesting. Missouri head coach Eli Drinkowitz, he's tired of the playoff or bust mentality. He said that playoff or bust mentality has no place in college football, especially with only 12 teams making the playoff. We'll discuss that when we come back. Do you agree? We'll get to all of that next.
Radio.
All right, and we are back. I'm Justin Kinner with you here on a Thursday. I appreciate Paul Keels, the voice of the Buckeyes right now. I mean, he's always busy, but especially this time of year, calling every football game, basketball game. I mean, he's busy, and I appreciate that he fits us here in Dayton into his schedule. He's been doing that for the last couple of years. Really, Paul's great. I love the fact that he comes on with us and giving us some insight, not just on the Buckeyes, but the Big Ten as a whole. I thought this was interesting. So, I mean, no one really cares about the Missouri football program by any means. Let's just be clear. But obviously with Missouri, you know, they're a one-loss team. Now they're a two-loss team, and they're pretty much out of I mean, they're not really going to be considered for the college football playoff rankings. And, you know, I think that when you're a program like that, it's kind of tough because it's like, hey, you know, how do you deem what is a successful season when you're at a school like Missouri? You know, you pick up your second or third loss or whatever, you're out of the conversation. I mean, it was a surprise that they're even in the conversation to begin with. You look at programs like Vanderbilt. I mean, hell, even Indiana at this point. But Dragowitz, it's not a surprise that they come out after, you know, getting that loss this past weekend and instantly is already talking about, you know, he's upset with the playoff or bust mentality. I'm here to tell you, Drinkowitz his name is being thrown out there for a lot of these not bigger jobs, but these big job openings. I wouldn't want him as my head coach with that mentality. So he comes out and says, we got to get out of this man, oh man, it's playoff or bust. If the season only counts for 12 football teams and we got 127 D1 football teams, that math's not going to math very well. There's a whole heck of a lot to be proud of. If you're a loser, if you are not, I mean, like, I don't get it. Like, you're in the SEC and you are auditioning right now potentially for the Florida job, for the Penn State job, for a lot of these bigger jobs out there. And I guess my mentality is if I'm the athletic director at Florida or Penn State or anywhere, and I hear a coach out there that we might be considering for our vacant opening, and I hear that coach say, hey, you know, we will not. So this is a coach that does not have a playoff or bust mentality. Because I'm telling you right now, not only did Nick Saban have a playoff or bust mentality, he had a national championship or bust mentality. I'm here to tell you right now that Ryan Day, the reason he's great is because it's not a playoff or bust mentality for Ryan Day. It's national championship or bust mentality for Ryan Day. So they may not come out and say that, but you know damn well that if they, you know, those seasons that Ohio State missed the playoff, you think Urban was, you know, doing well? He was so stressed, he retired. Like, think Ryan Day does well when this team misses the playoff? Heck no. You could tell just because their effort, I mean, just human nature and just the way that these athletes and these coaches and us as fans, and it's no one to blame. It's just human nature for us to all just be let down if our team doesn't make the playoff. This is a loser mentality, in my opinion. Yes, you better have a playoff or bust. So what are you telling your team whenever you stand in front of them in July as camp is about to get underway? What are you telling them at the beginning of the season? Hey, guys, we're just going to go out there and have fun and hope for the best? Or are you telling them, hey, we got to bust our ass so we can make the playoffs? We're going to be national championship contenders? Like, what is your message then? I think it's a loser mentality to actually sit there and complain because you have I think it's a privilege to have a playoff or bust mentality. Because I tell you what, Indiana now has that. And Indiana didn't have that years ago. And a lot of Indiana alum, and not a lot, but a ton of Indiana alum would have loved to have played for an Indiana football program that had a playoff or bust mentality. Kurt Signetti, he didn't go to Indiana with loser talk. He went to Indiana and started saying that Ohio State sucks. I mean, no one actually thought that Ohio State sucked, but they appreciated the fact that this guy had the cojones to actually say something as stupid as that. And then not only to say it, but to go out there and then only have 2 losses in 2 years, and one of them is against Ohio State. But Indiana football is for real. They're the number 2 team in the country, and they have a head coach that gives a damn and actually has a playoff or bust mentality and truly probably believes, he's crazy enough to truly believe that Indiana might have a championship or bust mentality. And then you got Eli Drinkowitz over here, or Eli Drinks a Lot over here, saying stupid things like, man, oh man, we got to get rid of this playoff or bust mentality. What are you talking about? College football is a results-based business, and if you're going to sit there and say that we got to get rid of the playoff or bust mentality, I think that's soft. And then, of course, leave it up to Kirk Herbstreit to come out and say, so true. He tweets, he quote tweets this or whatever you call it on X nowadays. Kirk Herbstreit says, so true. Great to have the college football playoff, obviously, as a goal, but the season isn't over if that's out of reach. What are you talking about? For some teams, yes. But Drinkowitz is about to be, poached away to go to one of those vacant jobs potentially. And if I'm a Penn State alum and I hear that, I don't want Drinkowitz as my head coach. Because I guarantee you this, if Penn State was fortunate enough to pull away, to be able to poach, one of Ohio State's coaches, I guarantee you Brian Hartline's not going to Penn State and saying, guys, it's not playoff or bust. It's just about competing. Yes, if you are one of those 127 teams that does not make the playoff, many of you don't view that as a failure because many of you don't have the expectations to make it. The ones that do deem it as a playoff or bust, that's because you have a good quality team that has expectations. So, no, I think he's full of it. I think Kirk Herbstreit's full of it. I think both these guys are full of it. It is a privilege to have a playoff or bust expectation. In fact, that expectation is what ultimately led to James Franklin being let go. But good for James Franklin for building up a roster that put them in position to have national championship or bust expectations. So I don't know why I let that quote irritate me. But again, when he comes out and says, we got to get out of this man, oh man, it's playoff or bust mentality. If the season only counts for 12 football teams and we got 127 D1 programs, that math's not going to math very well. There's a whole heck of a lot to be proud of. So in my mentality, I think that because it's a 12-team playoff now, I would have agreed in a 14 playoff era. During the 14 playoff era, I would have agreed more with that. But in a 12-team college football playoff era, where we're seeing the likes of Vanderbilt compete for the playoffs and Indiana and the programs that never would have had a shot in the 4-team era, the fact that those teams are, yes, I think you definitely can have a playoff or bust expectation as far as that's concerned. Go ask Penn State this year. They had national championship or bust expectations. You think that they're going to sit there and say, well, we didn't accomplish our goals, but by golly, we had fun. That's a loser mentality. And that's not what they're going to say, by the way. But apparently that's what they do over at Missouri. Yeah, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. 937-518-1410. I'll open up the phone lines if jump in on the conversation. I disagree with Drinkowitz 100%. I think that, yes, what world does it make sense to get rid of the playoff or bust mentality? Your goal should be to make the playoff. And if you don't make the playoff, that means you didn't accomplish your goal. And I'm not saying that season is a failure, but that just means you fell short of achieving your goal. And that's a life expectation there. Stop with everybody gets a trophy. We got to take care of everyone's emotions and feelings. That's part of sports. You either succeed or you fail. You either accomplish what you were putting out to do or you don't. It's just like in life. We all have goals with our jobs. We all have aspirations with our careers, right? Let's not sit there and act like this is that crazy to sit there and put playoff or bust expectations on these programs. Do you agree with Eli Drinkowitz, the head coach of Missouri? Do you agree with him that we need to get rid of this playoff or bust mentality when it comes to the 12-team playoff era? 937-518-1410. Phone lines are open. Get your spot in line. The phone lines are open during the commercial break so I can get your calls and get you guys in line, and then we'll take your calls when we come back. We got some NFL, Reds, Browns, Bengals, all that fun stuff coming up around the corner. It's the Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. (937-518-1410), the number to call and jump in on the conversation. I'm Justin Kinner, back with you here on a Thursday. If you're a wrestling fan, we have cards subject to change coming up for you later on tonight, 6 to 8 o'clock. Benjamin Chimera and Big Kev will be bringing you that program coming up later on. 6 to 8 o'clock, Benjamin Chimera and Big Kev. If you're a wrestling fan, again, every Thursday night. Only program in the Miami Valley dedicated to all things professional wrestling talk right here on 1410 ESPN Radio. So if you don't like wrestling, that's fine. Show's not for you. If you're a wrestling fan, it's for you. So simple as that, as far as that's concerned. But again, we welcome you back. Shout out to Paul Keels. Appreciate him opening up the show with us. If you missed that, we have that coming up for you later on in hour number 2 as well. Make sure you are looking for and downloading the Justin Kinner Show podcast in your Apple iTunes, Google Play Store, wherever you get your podcasts. Every show will be archived and podcasted in its entirety. All the commercials cut out, all select interviews, select segments, shows in their entirety, all available. Just search the Justin Kinner Show wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, so I came across this clip, and I was more annoyed. I think I was more annoyed with do-gooder or Kirk Herbstreit for supporting this narrative. Like, I do believe that, I get this idea that, man, only when there was the 4-team college football playoff era, it was very tough to put playoff or bust expectations on teams in the 4-team playoff era. If you were a program like Cincinnati, who was actually one of the rare non-power 4 teams to make the playoff, it was one of those where you look at them and it's like they never really went into a season and said, hey, it's playoff or bust for us. And I understood that because the reality, it's hard to say that you have playoff or bust expectations when you don't really have a shot to make it to begin with. And that's what made what Cincinnati did years ago such a fun story. I don't want to say it was impressive because it took a lot of teams failing around them for them to get to the spot, but nonetheless, they got there. And Fickle's, last year there, or what is it, the last or second to last, either way, whatever it was. The point is like for them, I wouldn't have done that. But during the 14 playoff era, no, I don't think you could have put a playoff or bust expectation on every team in college football. And I'm not even saying you have to put a playoff or bust expectation on every team in college football now, but I definitely think I think that net of teams, when you cast out that net, I think there are way more teams now that should be involved or held to a playoff or bust expectation. And I don't always think that it's a season-by-season thing. I think as a program, you should have the goal every year to make the playoff. And if you don't make the playoff, it's a failed season, and you got to do everything you can that offseason to put yourself back in position to be a playoff contender the next year. I just think college athletics is so cutthroat right now. You can't actually sit there like Dayton and even a Wright State or any program out there. You can't come out and say, no, it's not our goal to make the NCAA tournament this year. It's just about having fun and developing. And, if we don't make the tournament, oh, well, no. In the world of NIL, everyone that is donating to your NIL collective, it is to help you get the best players out on the floor with the return on investment being winning, dancing in March. It's as simple as that. Which means I think now, yes, I think it has expanded the net for teams that you throw out there for who's involved in the NCAA or bust conversation. I think it's a fair one. I think it's the same thing in college football, and even more so in college football, because in the 12-team college football playoff era, you're a Big Ten team, an SEC team. I actually think every program in both conferences should be held to a playoff or bust expectation. And it doesn't mean that, oh my gosh, you didn't make the playoff, you're a failure of a program, you should just fold and move on. No, but like, Maryland's going to miss the playoff. No surprise there. But should they as a program just sit there and say it's okay? Should they, I don't think they are. That's why they fired their head coach. Can you imagine if Indiana viewed themselves the way we've always viewed them as they were the losingest program in the history of college football up until that crown was passed on to Northwestern recently. But the point is, imagine if Kurt Signetti viewed his program the way everyone else did. He didn't. In fact, we kind of mocked him a little bit. But now he viewed Indiana as a certain way, and now they are playing a certain way. Now, the reason I say that is because, yes, there is more money being piped into the Indiana program than ever before, but why do you think that is? It's because he demanded that. He said, if I'm going to coach here, if I'm going to do what you want me to do here, I need money. I need resources. And Indiana, for the first time, is doing that, and look what happened. They're not piping all that money and resources into that program to miss the playoff, to play in a meaningless bowl game. So when Eli Drinkowitz, the head coach for Missouri, comes out and says that we have to get rid of this man, oh man, it's playoff or bust mentality, I disagree with him wholeheartedly. In fact, for a guy that is being thrown out there for a lot of these major vacant positions right now, I would be a little weary if I'm any of those programs. I don't want a head coach that truly believes it's laughable to have a playoff or bust expectation, because guess what? Penn State, they fired James Franklin because they don't have a playoff or bust mentality. If they did, he would still be employed. They have a national championship or bust mentality, which means Eli Drinkowitz probably not cut out for that job. Guess what, Florida? It's not just about the playoff for them. They want to be national championship contenders again like they were with Urban Meyer. So guess what, Eli Drinkowitz? You're probably not cut for that job either. You are probably just the perfect fit for Missouri, because I actually believe Missouri, they want to make the playoffs. They're mad when they don't make it. They must not have playoff or bust expectations based on the way you feel comfortable saying that there. Because I promise you, if Ryan Day came out and said, we got to get rid of this playoff or bust expectation, can you imagine if he would have said that 2 years ago when they missed it? He would have been fired on the spot. Eli Drinkowitz, I wouldn't want him as my coach. After hearing that, no thanks. Thanks, but no thanks. 937-518-1410. Shaw, you're on hold, or actually you're on live now. How are you?
Not bad. How about yourself?
Another day in paradise. Happy Thursday. What's up?
It's not that I 100% completely disagree with you. It's just that I think there's a difference between a Missouri and an Ohio State, and there's a difference between a Missouri and an Alabama.
But would have there been a difference?
Missouri and a Michigan.
There's a difference between an Ohio State and an Indiana, and Indiana still views themselves now as a playoff or bust program.
Indiana went and spent the money.
You don't think Missouri's spending money? Maybe not at the level of some of these bigger schools, but what are they spending the money for then?
They're spending the money to get by, to say that they're collecting money. That's the number one question amongst all of sports. Why is the Big Ten still trying to figure out how they can get more money? They're getting $100 million from the TV contracts, but yet the Big Ten's out here trying to get private equity firms to give them more money.
Yeah.
Where's the money going? Yes. I mean, that's a whole different topic for another day, but that's the whole thing. Like, not everybody's spending the same amount on football,
but they're spending money on football with the mindset of putting a winner out on the field. And if you're not putting a winner out on the field and competing for what they're hoping is their ROI, I don't know what's the point of spending that money then?
But that's not on Eli Drinkowitz if he's not getting the money.
But Eli Drinkowitz should still have a playoff or bust mentality as a coach, and to hear him crying about that, I have no respect for that.
I don't think he was crying about it. I think he was just
tears down his face, Shaw, tears down his cheek.
I don't think that's what was happening. I mean, like I said, I don't think what I think he was doing was trying to make his team make it sound better. That, I mean, this year they had the expectations. Mm-hmm. So that's going to my point too. Some years those teams like that, yes, you'll go in with the expectations. If it doesn't happen and you still finish the year 9-3, 10-2, it's still a good season just because you didn't make the playoff. Now, if you're at Ohio State, you're not at Alabama, you're out of Michigan, you're at programs like that, then yes, it's not just making the college football playoff that's good enough. It's you got to start coming home with national championships. Missouri is not that program. They never have been that program. They never will be that program.
I'm not asking for a national championship. I'm asking for a playoff.
And they play in the SEC. Sometimes there's more teams in the SEC than any other.
Vanderbilt.
Conference. They're not 100% in the playoff this year. Now, are they?
But they're right there. But they're right there, and they're competing. And I guarantee you, and if they miss it, and Vanderbilt, and I guarantee you, but they weren't saying that. You can't say that after you lost a game that basically eliminated you from the playoff picture. Then it sounds like excuse making. Like Vanderbilt,
make more money. He's trying to get more money from, and it worked because he was just signed to a contract extension.
Because Penn State said, "I don't want that loser. I need a guy that has a championship or bust mentality."
No, Penn State jumped the gun and fired a guy that they should have never fired. That's what Penn State did. And nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to hear about it. But that's what happened. Penn State jumped the gun. They got antsy. They got emotional, made a 12-year-old's decision, and fired a coach that they're not going to be able to replace who's better than the guy who they just fired. That's what happened at Penn State. That's what happened at LSU. That's what's happening at Florida. That's what's happening at all these programs. That's why all these other guys are signing contract extensions to stay where they're at. So what's Florida, LSU, and Penn State going to do? They're going to go get 3 guys that are worse than one of the guys that they already had in the program already and already had a program being built.
Mm-hmm.
You can have two conversations. Yes, everybody wants to win the national championship. Not everybody's fighting for the same national championship. They're just not.
We're not talking
Because not
national
everybody's
championships.
paying the
It's
same amount of
simply
money.
every program, especially in Missouri, should have a playoff or bust mentality. And if not, then why don't you just go join the MAC?
I'm sure they do have a playoff or bust mentality. I understand.
I don't think they
that's what
do.
he
Did you
said.
hear the
I
coach?
understand. I understand that's what he said. But I don't think like he went into the season going, yep, I don't think we're going to make the playoffs. I hope we just get it. I just hope we make a bowl. He's trying. He got what he wanted. He got a contract extension.
He was going to be good either
also
way. He
think
either
that-
got a
I
contract
also-
extension or he got paid a lot of money to go elsewhere and coach. He was going to get paid no matter what.
And he got paid to stay at Missouri, where he's already got a program building and have. I mean, I know you probably don't, but some people have watched Missouri football through the year, kind of like when Davidson kicked the ball backwards in 1997. You saw what that stadium was, and you see what that stadium is now, and it's being rebuilt, and they're becoming. But not everybody walks into the situation the same
So
way.
why are they
Alabama-
rebuilding all that? Why are they building all that? Why are they investing into the stadium and doing all these things if they don't have a playoff or
Because
bust
the money's
mentality?
got to get spent somewhere. The money's got to get spent somewhere. But like you act like that Missouri is in the same type of recruiting base as an Ohio State or an Alabama. You act like Missouri and
I haven't
Iowa
acted like that
State.
at all, actually. I don't think I said that once.
No, your mentality does. That's what it comes across as. That all these teams are fighting on the same level playing field. They're not. Ohio State has a recruiting base that majority of this country does not have.
Boise made the playoff.
Michigan has advantages that majority of these countries.
Arizona State made the playoff. All right, Vandy's
Okay.
fighting for the playoff. Indiana's
what
made
are
the
they this
playoff
year?
back-to-back
What are they this
years.
year?
I mean, my
What's
goodness.
Arizona State this year.
It don't
What's
matter.
Arizona
The point
State
is, and I'm sure they're disappointed.
Yeah, and Missouri until last Saturday was in the playoff hunt.
Mm-hmm. And
They were in the playoff
and,
hunt.
and
then
once
they
that
lost.
happened, then their coach is making excuses.
He's not making any excuses.
He
He's
is. He
making
wasn't
a
saying
point.
this when they were in the
You don't
playoff
agree
picture.
with
Now
it,
that
but
they're
he's making a
now,
point. He's not making no excuses. You don't agree with it, but that doesn't mean anything.
you don't wait until you're
You
out of
just
the
don't
playoff
agree with it.
picture to then try to convince everyone, like, hold on, we haven't had a bad season. You just missed the playoff, my dude. Had they won, would he have been saying that?
No, he wouldn't.
Exactly. That's my point. It's an
but
excuse.
it
He
doesn't
wants
change
everyone to
the
feel
fact.
bad for
It
him.
does
And
not
it's like,
change the
just do
fact.
your job and go win a game you're supposed to win.
But you can't control every aspect of it.
You can
can't.
control what you say.
He's the coach. He put them in the position to win. The players got to go out and win. So maybe the school should give him more money to go out and get better players.
But why? Why, if you don't have a playoff or a bust mentality? I mean, making the playoffs isn't that important. So who cares? Why am I going to give you money?
I just think you're making a bigger hill out of an anthill. Like it doesn't matter. Like it's irrelevant.
I don't think
Of
it's
course,
irrelevant.
he doesn't say that.
If Ryan,
it's playoff or
if
bust.
any coach that says that, it's
He's
not a good look.
Ohio State. He's not going to say that. It's not a level playing field.
Then, I mean, but he needs to view himself as that if he wants it. Kurt Signetti went to Indiana.
I'm
He
sure he
didn't
does
go to
view
Indiana
himself
saying,
as that.
hey, we're Ohio State now. He said, no, I want to become Ohio State. I demand that. And that's why Signetti's a winner right now.
Kirk Cincinnati came in with a completely different situation than what Missouri and Iowa State and all these other teams have.
Yeah, worse.
Because one coach
Worse.
has done it. Because one coach
He
has done
literally
it, you're
brought
running
a
to the
bunch
hill
of
now.
James Madison players. Everyone acts like, oh man, yeah, he brought a lot of his talented
He
players.
paid
It's
the
not like
third highest in fucking NIL last year.
dude, what the heck is wrong with you? You're done. All right. Justin Kinner Show, 1410 ESPN Radio. We'll step away for a few moments. Oh, we'll be right back.
Painkillers, steroids, ice packs, and gravity chairs. Nothing relieved Abby's back pain. But the answer was
Forecast 100% chance of overreactions, heated debates, and a slight drizzle of hope for Bengals fans. Sorry, guy with Burrow jersey. You're listening to the Justin Kinner Show, 1410 ESPN Radio.
You're an angry elf. What is wrong with you, Shaw? You know better. You know better. I don't even know what just happened. Rob on YouTube says, love it. Don't challenge Justin unless you're ready. I agree. Coach making excuses. See, Rob gets it. Rob's a smart man. He gets it. He understands it. I think we're going to leave that topic alone for a bit. We welcome you back. It's the Justin Kinner Show, 1410 ESPN Radio. I don't even know what I want to talk about right now, to be honest with you. Oh, that's wild, is what it is. But nonetheless, hour 2. Paul Keels joined us in the first hour, and we will be getting into that more coming up in a bit. On our socials, ESPN Dayton on YouTube and Facebook across the board, on X, we had Jay Morrison on, who covers the Bengals, earlier in the week, and one thing we discussed was the potential return of Burrow on Thanksgiving night. And whatever, we've talked about it ad nauseum this week with the return storyline of Burrow, but he wants to return on Thanksgiving night, and the Bengals at the Ravens. As a Bengals hater, as you guys call me, I kind of enjoy sometimes when things don't go your way, especially when things don't go my team's way. In fact, when the Bengals were on the bye week last week, I kept trying to feel I've watched the Browns play horrible all season. I'm like, why does this Browns loss feel so bad today? I know that the Browns stink. Why am I so angry? And then it clicked. The Cincinnati Bengals they've been a mental offset for me. Every time I'm pissed about how the Browns are performing, I then switch the channel over. I see that your team is losing in a completely different way, but maybe just as horrific. And it kind of just mellows me out a bit. It's a good balance. And this past Sunday, I didn't have that. So when the Browns lost the way that they did, I didn't have a Bengals collapse to make me feel better, and it was a bad weekend. I'm looking forward to the Bengals coming back this weekend, man. I'm telling you, but nonetheless. So, no, the storyline Thursday, if Joe Burrow does return on Thanksgiving night, I keep throwing this out there. So I asked Jay Morrison, I'm like, it sounds crazy, but Joe Burrow coming back does what? What does Joe Burrow's return necessarily do? I mean, it's Joe Burrow, yes, but, Joe Burrow, Flacco's averaging 300 yards a game. He's averaging 2+ touchdowns a game. The Bengals have had, since Joe Flacco arrived in Cincinnati, the Bengals have the number 1 offense in the National Football League. So I don't know. The Bengals already have the number 1 offense in the National Football League. I don't understand truly what Joe Burrow does that is going to be different. What is Joe Burrow going to do that Joe Flacco hasn't been providing them already, I guess, is the question I have. And that's not even a shot at Joe Burrow, but it's just a legit question. Unless he could tackle, unless he could play safety, unless he could, get to the quarterback, unless he could play linebacker, I don't really truly understand why everyone's so excited outside of the fact that, hey, that's my quarterback and I'm excited to see him. If that's what you're excited about, then fine. I'll let, because I have that power, whatever. I'll dismiss the fact that, okay, yeah, you just want your quarterback back. Okay, cool. I'd be the same way. But if you think that, oh man, now our playoff chances are back because we have Joe Burrow, I think that's absolutely insane. I think that's ridiculous thinking. I don't think that that's going to be the case whatsoever. So I started thinking about that Thanksgiving night. What is going to be the bigger storyline on Thanksgiving night if Joe Burrow returns? Which storyline would be better? You have Joe Flacco, who played in Baltimore, who won a Super Bowl in Baltimore, won a Super Bowl MVP with the Baltimore Ravens. And then, he's now the quarterback of the Bengals, and he's leading the Bengals into Baltimore in the middle of a playoff race. And he has a chance to go into Baltimore where he won a Super Bowl and a Super Bowl MVP. And he gets to return to Baltimore, a place he hasn't won since leaving. And he has a chance to rip their heart out and put the Bengals in a position to make the postseason. I think that to me is a better storyline than Joe Burrow coming off of the injured list for the 20th time in his career. Everyone's like, I think it's a big storyline. Joe Burrow coming back after being injured. I'm like, Joe Burrow always comes back after he's injured. Very rarely does a former Super Bowl MVP of a team bring a new team back into their place on Thursday night primetime football and, leading a resurgence for a team that desperately needed a quarterback replacement and is leading them into the playoffs potentially. I don't think it gets any bigger than that. I think that is the bigger storyline. I'm having a hard time. Jay and I have known Jay Morrison for years. In fact, when I very first started at Wright State, he was a Wright State reporter for Dayton Daily News. I got real close with Jay back then. So I respectfully disagree with Jay. I don't think Joe Burrow is the bigger storyline. To me, it's Joe Flacco. Like I said, there's nothing, oh, no, it has to be Joe Burrow. He's coming back after being injured. Yes, but that's what he does. He always comes back after being injured because he's always freaking injured. So I can't, I disagree respectfully. As far as the Joe Flacco thing, what he's doing at 40 years old, not just playing at 40, but dominating at 40 and leading the best offense in the NFL since he arrived in Cincinnati. I don't know how you could pick against that. And to do that, to go in, it's one thing too if this game was in Cincinnati, but it's in Baltimore. It's in Baltimore. It doesn't get any bigger than that. It doesn't get any bigger than that. But I don't think it's going to matter. I think you Bengals fans are going to have your cake and eat it too. I think that you're going to get to see Joe Flacco lead the Bengals into Baltimore on Thanksgiving night. And then again, I think that it's going to be an even bigger deal when you get Joe Burrow back against Josh Allen. But here's my concern for the Cincinnati Bengals. I think that the Cincinnati Bengals offense is going to roll this week against Pittsburgh. All right. I think after Pittsburgh, I think they're going to roll and have success against the Patriots. I don't know if they beat that. I'm really curious. If Cincinnati beats Pittsburgh this weekend, I'm very intrigued by that Patriots matchup. I really am. Like, you got to, because if the Bengals remain in the playoff hunt and Joe Flacco is putting up the numbers that he is, and he goes up and puts the big numbers up at Pittsburgh, the division leader, and gets right back into the mix of things at the top, like, I don't know how, as ridiculous as this sounds, that you can't put Joe Flacco in an MVP discussion with the numbers he's put up. And if they go and beat Pittsburgh, the division leader, for the second time, and they catapult themselves in the division lead in conversation, and then if Joe Flacco goes on to beat the Patriots the following week, I'm sorry, I see one of the craziest scenarios developing here where Joe Burrow is going to be a jerk and come back and try to spoil what could be an MVP run for Joe Flacco. I would have a problem with it. I love chaos. And the chaos that I'm seeing unfold is potentially that. Joe Flacco is putting up absolutely insanely ridiculous numbers. And if he goes on to continue that, I mean, man, what do we do? What do you do if you are the Cincinnati Bengals in this particular situation? What is the decision that you're going to make? I mean, he's completing 60% of his passes. He's throwing for 300 yards a game. All right, he has thrown for 13 touchdowns. In fact, that's the 15th most in the NFL, and he's only played in, 5 games with the Cincinnati Bengals alone? So, I mean, I'm just saying, like, the wins need to start coming, but these losses aren't because of Joe Flacco. Like, these losses aren't Joe Flacco. I mean, he threw for, you know what I mean? Like, that's the crazy part about all of this. He threw for 470 yards and 4 touchdowns against the Chicago Bears and lost. All right. Against Pittsburgh, he threw for 342 yards and 3 touchdowns. All right. He threw for 220 and 2 touchdowns against Green Bay. All right. He threw for multiple touchdowns against the Jets. Like, Joe Flacco, if he goes on to have another monster number night against Pittsburgh's bad defense and Cincinnati wins, all right, and then they go on and he has another monster game and the Bengals are right there in it against Drake May and the Patriots and they win, and that's leading into the Baltimore game, yeah, I would find that fascinating. I know it's unlikely, but it's not that crazy, because you got to think, if the Bengals would have split with either the Jets or the Bears, I mean, imagine if they would have got both, but if they would have split, I think you'd be hearing more Joe Flacco MVP conversation. And I'm not stirring the pot with that. I don't know how you can say otherwise. He's played in 5 games and has thrown for over 2,000 yards. Like, you know what I mean? That's crazy. Like Joe Flacco, what he's doing. So that's all I'm trying to say is, like, I see a scenario unfolding that is going to get very interesting and very tense. And if I'm Joe Flacco, who's come in to save the day, and he's done more than save the day, I would have a problem with Joe Burrow trying to rush back. And you know what? Joe Flacco would have no say over it. And I'm not sure any of you would feel bad for him, but I would. I would. I would feel bad if Joe Flacco at 40 plus years old is having an MVP like season and in the discussion, and Joe Burrow's ego decides to come back and just rip that opportunity away from him when he's not even 100% to begin with. I would have a major problem with it. I do think that one reason that Joe Burrow is getting restless over on the sideline is because, he wasn't happy with how poor they were playing those 2 weeks against Minnesota and against Denver and against Detroit. But I think he enjoyed seeing the drop off so that he could look around and say, man, look how bad this team is without me. You can't be in this. You could say this is a shot at Joe Burrow if you want. I don't know. I think all these guys are uber competitive. I deep down don't think Burrow is thoroughly enjoying watching what Joe Flacco is doing. I really don't believe it. I think it kind of makes Joe Burrow look a little like, hey, we can replace your production. The Ravens can't replace Lamar Jackson's production. The Bills can't replace Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes with the Chiefs. Like, those teams can't replace their quarterback's production, but the Bengals have proven that they can. And not that anyone's having doubts about Joe Burrow's future in Cincinnati. That's ridiculous. But I do think it's an ego blow. I do think it's a kick to the old ego for Joe Burrow watching a 40-year-old do what he's capable of doing. I think it's an ego blow. And I think that's why you're seeing Joe Burrow fight so bad, and so hard to get back. I think it's an awkward thing. Do you guys agree? Isn't it awkward when you see the clips of Burrow back out there at practice? You don't think it's a little awkward? You don't think Joe Flacco's kind of looking at him off to the side like, dude, I know this is your team, but you're rushing back. All right, you're rushing back, and you're trying to toss yourself out there into a situation that's not calling for you at the moment. I don't know. I just think that these are two alpha males that right now want the same thing, and I don't think Joe Burrow is sitting back comfortably watching all this unfold. I would be interested by it. Doug Toby, super sensitive Bengal fan. Doug Toby says, if I was Cleveland, I would trade Gabriel and Sanders for Flacco. LOL, OL, OL, OL. Okay, good one. I don't know why every time you have to come back with something about Cleveland. I don't know does that make anything I say less true? Cleveland's bad. Kinner's a Browns fan, so if he says something about my team I don't like, I got to say something about his team, and that makes anything I say less true? I don't think so. Making a joke about the Browns doesn't change the fact that your golden boy, Joe Burrow, his production's been easily replaced. I don't think it changes that fact, Mr. Toby. It just doesn't. Sorry. Rob on YouTube says, when they show Burrow on the sideline, he looks like he's pouting. I agree. Maybe I'm just looking at it through hater lenses, but I feel like Burrow's rushing back because he's pissed off slightly because he's not happy watching Joe Flacco just sling it all over the field because he's thinking, for one, those numbers should be mine. Those touchdowns should be mine. And the success of the offense, that should be because of me. And it's clearly not. Now, it's because of him. Don't get me wrong. Like, Burrow is elite. I'm not saying he's not. But again, that's the thing. When you're elite, deep down, you're not thoroughly enjoying watching someone come in and put up the same type of numbers as you. Joe Flacco's production, it's not like, oh, they're winning with the backup quarterback. They're in position to win every game because of the backup quarterback. And they're losing because of the defense. And I'm not convinced that Joe Burrow being quarterback over the last 2 weeks would have been any different. Nonetheless, Doug Toby, what up, Doug? Doug says, just giving you some content. We could talk about the Browns. I've said this before. I'm not like defending the Browns here, but Joe Flacco being in Cleveland does what? All right, does what? They brought him over there because they felt they had enough to compete. And once they realized they didn't have enough to compete, it made no sense to continue to roll out a 40-year-old quarterback when, like a bunch of fools, they drafted 2 rookie quarterbacks, and you had to give these guys as many games as possible to know what you have. Joe Flacco being in Cleveland, I don't even care if Flacco was producing. It still technically wouldn't have mattered because Cleveland needs to know what these guys can do, talking about Gabriel and Sanders. So I laugh when people say that. And I also laugh when people say, oh, Joe Flacco had to leave Cleveland to have success. No, Joe Flacco had success in Cleveland. He led them to the playoffs. This whole movie that you guys think you're enjoying for the first time ever, this is actually the repeat. This is actually a remake. We've seen this movie before. It happened in Cleveland once. Now it's happening in Cincinnati. Did he have success in the first couple of games of the season? No, but Cleveland's bad. Cincinnati, their offense isn't bad. You have Jamar. I mean, I would hope you're not bad. When you pipe in $70 million to 2 pass catchers, I would hope that Joe Flacco looks better in Cincinnati than he did in Cleveland. Nonetheless, it's the Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. The Dayton Weight Loss Secret Program has successfully helped thousands of people lose 20 to 30 pounds in a month or two. Schedule your free consultation in person or virtually by calling 937-999-1480 or online at DaytonWeightLossSecret.com. Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. We'll be right back.
Doctors recommend regular exercise to manage stress. We recommend that you just watch the Bengals defense. Same result. Elevated heart rate, yelling, "I can't do this," and the occasional tears. Today's forecast, 100% chance of overreactions, heated debates, and a slight drizzle of hope for Bengals fans. Sorry, guy with Burrow jersey. You're listening to the Justin Kinner Show, 1410 ESPN Radio.
Potty mouth Shaw struck again. Luckily, the dump button took care of it. And for those asking, the dump button takes care of it on the radio side. I'm sorry for those who were insulted by the foul language of a grown man named David Shaw. Tisk, tisk. All because this all started over something that I don't even think, like, I have hot takes on this show. I don't think this is one of my hottest takes. I don't think that this take should have led to Shaw losing his freaking mind. Oh, Andy Bernard. Shaw, sometimes, like, I don't know if you watch The Office, but sometimes you got a hint of the Bernard in you. Like someone put your stapler in Jell-O, my friend. Like, what happened today? What happened today? All because, and again, I don't think this is that hot of a take. Eli Drinkwitz, the head coach for Missouri, came out and was boo-hooing because obviously they didn't accomplish what they needed to accomplish. They lost against Texas A&M this past weekend. And that loss, Missouri was number 22 in the college football playoff rankings, and Missouri suffered, a loss 38-17. That's their third loss of the season. And, they were being kind of propped up for a while. They were in the top 15. They were close to the top 10. They were being really propped up. They were feeling good about themselves. Eli Drinkwitz, he's being involved. His name's being thrown out there for a lot of the vacant coaching openings, like at Penn State and Florida and some of these bigger schools, right? Or better jobs. I shouldn't say bigger schools, but better jobs. Okay. You are a head coach in the SEC. You are a regular top 25 team now. You are you know what I mean? Like you have the resources to go get players that are good enough to put yourself in the top 25 conversation, to put yourself in position to flirt with the playoff. If schools like Vanderbilt can do it, if schools like Indiana could do it, if schools like Arizona State the year ago can do it, and Boise State, and I mean, the list goes on and on. It's not that crazy to expect a program like Missouri to be in the playoff conversation or to expect to make the damn playoff. So for Eli Drinkwitz to come out and boo-hoo about playoff or bust expectations, I just wholeheartedly disagree with them. I don't think it's wrong to have playoff or bust expectations for certain programs. And I'm going to be honest, I think if you are an SEC program or a Big Ten program, you have an advantage over the ACC. You have an advantage over the Big 12. You have so many advantages. I think if you don't play in if you don't play in the Big Ten or the SEC, I think it's valid to have a head coach at one of those programs say, yeah, it's not fair to have an expectation of playoff or bust for us. I mean, our TV deals don't distribute the money to us like they do in those bigger conferences. We don't get the money rolling. The Big Ten's about to get this $1 billion deal done to distribute across the field. That's just kind of, a lot of people are talking about how dirty it sounds, and we'll get to more of that later. But the bottom line is the resources that are provided to Big Ten and SEC schools, I don't feel bad for you if you can't cut it or figure it out. Because you didn't take advantage of the era of when you didn't have to pay players. So now I don't feel bad for you that you're not prepared to have to pay the players and run a program because you never took advantage of running a program without paying the players legally the first time. So I don't want to hear it from Eli Drinkwitz when he says things like, we have to get rid of this, oh man, it's playoff or bust of the season, only, if you don't accomplish what you want to make the playoffs. 12 teams make the playoffs. Okay? You should be competing for those playoffs, and if you don't make it, I think that means you didn't accomplish what you set out to accomplish at the beginning of the season. At least I would like to think that that was one of your goals. Eli Drinkwitz, you mean to tell me that at the beginning of the season, you weren't sitting in front of your team saying, guys, our goal is to make the playoff this year? I'm not even asking you to have a championship or bust mentality. I'm just simply saying you got to have the belief with all the money that your program is going to be spending on players and resources and field renovations and stadium renovations and all of this going on. You have to at least have the mentality that we are doing all of this to make the playoff. And if you don't make the playoff, then what the hell were you doing all of that for? Well, we just hope to win 8, 9, 10 games. And we all hope to make, memories that will last us a lifetime. And I hope that, I get invited to these players' weddings, and I hope that they tell their kids about the memories that they had. That's why you're doing all that stuff? No. You're doing all of that so that you can put yourself in position to go get some of the best players in the country to win as many football games as possible, to make the damn expanded 12-team playoff. This quote I would have agreed with this quote 3 or 4 years ago during the 4-team era. I don't agree with it now in the 12-team college football playoff era. And by the way, it's okay to say, yeah, we came up short of our goal this year. Because guess what? Ohio State, if they don't win the national championship this year, guess what they're going to say? Yeah, we fell short of our goal this year. And now that you should have more than one goal. Ohio State, it's always beat Michigan, win the Big Ten, win a national championship. And Ohio State has failed 2 of those 3 goals. They failed those 3 goals consistently over the last couple of years. Last year, they failed to beat Michigan. They failed to win a Big Ten championship, but they got the big one. They won a national championship because Ohio State is a program that expects to win national championships, which is why Ryan Day's seat was getting a little hot because there was no national championships. They weren't winning Big Ten championships. They weren't even beating their rival. It wasn't that crazy that the fan base or what was it that Kirk Herbstreit called everybody? The chaotic lunatics or whatever, the lunatic fringe or whatever the weird garage band name that he gave everybody. But the bottom line is you could sit there and call those fans names all you want, but guess what? It wasn't the fans that think that way only. It's a lot of the people that are spending a lot of their hard-earned money and giving it to the program so that they can put a championship contender out there as well. Are you going to call the athletic director and the athletics department? Are they the lunatic fringe as well because they expect Ohio State to win a national championship? No. It's absolutely moronic of Eli Drinkowitz, who is in position to get a Penn State job, to get a Florida job, to get these big jobs. If I'm any of those schools, all of those schools fired their head coach because they weren't making the playoff and they weren't in position to win a national championship. Now you have this buffoon who's sitting here saying, yeah, we got to get rid of this playoff or bust expectation. Really? Because the jobs that are looking at you and that you're looking at them, or we're looking at them, their whole mindset was, you got to come here and get us to the playoff. And the reason you stayed at Missouri and the reason you accepted that extension is because you were fine staying at a school that was fine with you underperforming, which is why, Matt Rule, Penn State, you probably lucked out not getting a Matt Rule. Matt Rule was fine at Nebraska because he doesn't have a top 25 win. They're not really doing a whole hell of a lot there, and yet they were going to give him a raise. He would be stupid to leave that place. You don't even have to win or make the playoff there, and they're going to give you raises. Eli Drinkowitz, you know what? It's crazy to me that you're comfortable there, but yet then again, it's not because you're comfortable accepting the contract extension and the raise because guess what? All you have to do is win 9 games a year and you're going to get raises like you just did right now. And you could have got paid even more money to go to Penn State, but oh no, you can't go there because they would actually expect you to win a game and heaven forbid you do that. It's a loser mentality to sit there to say that playoff or bust expectations need to be voided from college athletics. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I don't care what level of basketball or football or college athletics you play. The goal is to win. I don't get it. I don't even get why this is a hot take. I just don't. Anyways, is what it is. The Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. We'll step away for a few moments. We opened up the show. Okay, we opened up the show with the voice of the Buckeyes, Paul Keels. And that's if you missed it, don't worry. We have that coming up for you next. And by the way, leave Shaw alone. Shaw's a hell of a supporter of the show. In fact, what he just did there, now I don't want him to cuss on the air, but I like when he gets angry. I think it's funny. He makes me laugh. I watch The Office when Andy Bernard gets angry and he kicks a trash can and he punches a hole through the wall and he's going to lose his freaking mind. I love that stuff, man. I get a kick out of it. Leave Shaw alone. He's fine. He's probably the number 1 supporter of the show. All right. So be nice to him. Also, Shaw, calm down. Count to 10. If you don't know how to count to 10, find someone to help you count to 10. Calm the hell down. My God, you dropped the big word too. Man, that's probably the worst one you've dropped on the show. Ooh, that was bad. Paul Keels. If you missed it, we have it next.
Some investments grow in value, others change.